The Vorthan Empire was the most powerful force in the galaxy. They ruled over 3,000 star systems with an iron fist. Their massive fleets traveled between the stars, destroying anyone who dared to oppose them. For 500 years, no alien species had been brave enough to challenge their might. Their technology was far beyond anything other races possessed, and their cruelty was known throughout every corner of space. Emperor Malthus sat on his crystal throne in the heart of the imperial capital. He believed himself to be the master of everything that existed in the known universe. His palace was built from the bones of defeated enemies and decorated with treasures stolen from conquered worlds. Every day, representatives from 100 different species came to bow before him and beg for mercy. The emperor enjoyed watching them grovel and plead for their worthless lives. On this particular day, Admiral Korvax entered the throne room carrying a datapad in his clawed hands. Korvax was the Empire's most feared military commander. He had destroyed more worlds than any other general in Vorthan history. His ship, the Destroyer of Hopes, had turned entire solar systems into ash and dust. When lesser species saw his flag, they immediately surrendered rather than face his wrath. Korvax approached the crystal throne and bowed his head slightly. He was one of the few beings in the galaxy who did not grovel before the Emperor. The datapad in his hands contained information about a new world that Imperial scouts had discovered on the edge of known space, a small blue and green planet that the primitives who lived there called Earth. The Admiral read from his report, while the Emperor listened with growing amusement. The planet was inhabited by creatures called humans who appeared to be completely primitive according to the scout data. They still fought wars with crude metal weapons and chemical explosives. Their most advanced vehicles barely reached their own moon, and their technology was thousands of years behind even the weakest species in the Empire. Emperor Malthus laughed when he heard this information. These humans sounded like perfect candidates for slavery. The Empire always needed more workers for their mining operations on dangerous worlds, and humans appeared to be strong enough for heavy physical labor. Their planet was rich in resources that the Empire could exploit, and their location made them easy to conquer without interference from other galactic powers. What the Emperor and his admiral did not know was that humanity had been watching them for many years. Hidden deep space monitoring stations built inside asteroids and behind moons had been tracking every Vorthan ship that passed through human territory. The stations were so well concealed that even advanced alien sensors could not detect them. Human engineers had spent decades perfecting stealth technology by studying wreckage from crashed alien scout ships. Dr. Jinwoo worked in a secret underground laboratory beneath the city of Seoul. He was one of Earth's most brilliant scientists, and he had devoted his entire life to preparing for the day when aliens would come to Earth. His team of researchers had been reverse engineering alien technology for 20 years using pieces of crashed spacecraft that governments around the world had secretly recovered. The laboratory was filled with strange machines that combined human engineering with alien technology. Dr. Jinwoo had successfully created energy shields, particle beam weapons, and even primitive faster-than-light communication devices by studying alien artifacts. His work was so secret that only a few dozen people on Earth knew it existed. Every night he worked by the light of alien power cells, trying to unlock the secrets that might save his species. Commander Hyunwoo stood in the war room of Earth's newly formed Space Defense Force. The room was built deep underground beneath the South Korean capital, and it contained the most advanced computers and communication equipment that human science could produce. Holographic displays showed him everything that was happening in the solar system, including the approaching Vorthan invasion fleet. 2,000 enemy warships were moving toward Earth at incredible speed. The fleet was so large that it could be seen with telescopes from the surface of the planet. Captain Mina stood beside Commander Hyunwoo studying the tactical displays. She was the youngest starship commander in human history, and she had spent her entire adult life training for this moment. Her hands were clenched into fists as she watched the approaching doom. The Vorthans had made a terrible mistake by assuming that a species without faster than light travel could not possibly threaten them. They did not bother to send scouts to study human defenses or learn about human nature. If they had taken the time to research Earth properly, they would have discovered that humans had spent their entire history fighting each other and perfecting the art of warfare. Throughout human history, every major technological advancement had been used to create better weapons. Humans had fought with sticks and stones, then metal swords, then gunpowder, then nuclear weapons. They had developed tactics and strategies through thousands of years of constant conflict. When humans finally united against a common enemy, they became something far more dangerous than any single alien species could imagine. The Vorthon invasion fleet continued its approach toward Earth completely unaware that they were flying into the most elaborate trap in human history. Admiral Korvax stood on the bridge of his flagship, confident that this would be another easy victory for the Empire. He had already begun planning how to divide the human population among his various mining operations. But deep in the asteroid belt, Lieutenant Colonel Jin Young waited in his hidden command post. He controlled dozens of weapon platforms that had been secretly built into asteroids over the past decade. Human engineers had turned harmless-looking rocks into deadly weapons that could destroy the largest enemy ships. The weapons were powered by alien technology that Dr. Jinwoo had reverse-engineered, and they were completely invisible to Vorthon sensors. Major Sujin sat in the command chair of Earth's first real warship, the Defiance. The ship was hidden behind Mars, using cloaking technology that combined human stealth systems with alien energy shields. Unlike the huge, ornate Vorthon vessels, human ships were designed for speed, agility, and maximum firepower. Human military philosophy focused on efficiency rather than intimidation. The moment of truth was approaching as the Vorthon fleet entered the inner solar system. Admiral Korvax gave the order to advance toward Earth, expecting to find a defenseless world populated by helpless primitives. Instead, he was about to discover that humans were the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever produced. Admiral Korvax stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Destroyer of Hopes, as the massive Vorthon invasion fleet moved through Earth's solar system. The 2,000 warships spread out in perfect formation, each one bristling with enough firepower to destroy an entire city. The Admiral smiled as he looked at the tactical displays showing no sign of resistance from the primitive human world. The Vorthon ships were enormous and impressive, built to intimidate enemies into surrender rather than fight actual battles. Each vessel was decorated with the bones and skulls of defeated species and painted in the dark colors of the Empire. The largest ships were over 5 kilometers long and carried enough weapons to glass an entire continent. Their crews had never experienced defeat, and many of them were already celebrating their upcoming victory. Lieutenant Colonel Jin Young watched the enemy fleet through his targeting systems from his hidden position in the asteroid belt. He had been waiting for this moment his entire life. The weapon platforms he controlled were disguised as ordinary space rocks, but each one contained enough destructive power to cripple a Vorthon dreadnought. His finger hovered over the activation switch as the enemy ships moved closer to their doom. For months, human engineers had been placing hidden weapons throughout the solar system. Nuclear mines disguised as space debris had been scattered along the most likely approach routes. Railgun platforms, built into asteroids, were aimed at predetermined target zones. Missile launchers concealed on the dark sides of moons were loaded with warheads designed specifically to penetrate Vorthon armor. The trap was so extensive and well-planned that the Vorthons were flying straight into a carefully constructed killing field. Every possible escape route was covered by hidden weapons. Every approach vector was monitored by concealed sensors. The aliens had no idea that they were entering the most dangerous place in the galaxy major. Sujin waited aboard the Defiance as her ship remained hidden behind Mars using advanced cloaking technology. Her crew was completely silent as they prepared for the battle of their lives. Every person on the ship was a volunteer who had trained for years specifically to fight alien invaders. They knew that the fate of humanity depended on their performance in the next few hours. Dr. Jinwoo monitored the battle preparations from his underground laboratory. His computers were connected to every human weapon system in the solar system, and he was ready to coordinate the attack with scientific precision. Years of studying alien technology had taught him exactly where Vorthon ships were most vulnerable, and he had shared this knowledge with every human commander. The moment came when Admiral Korvax's flagship reached the predetermined target zone. Jin Young pressed the activation button and suddenly space erupted in brilliant flashes of nuclear fire. Hidden weapons throughout the asteroid belt activated simultaneously, creating a deadly crossfire that caught the Vorthan fleet completely by surprise. Massive explosions tore through the enemy formation as nuclear mines detonated against alien hulls. Railgun projectiles traveling at incredible speeds punched through Vorthan armor like bullets through paper. Missile swarms emerged from concealed launchers, each one guided by advanced artificial intelligence systems that had studied alien ship designs for decades. The Vorthans, who had never faced serious resistance in centuries, were thrown into complete panic. Their perfect formation dissolved as individual captains tried desperately to escape the trap. Their communication systems were being jammed by devices that Dr. Jinwoo had designed specifically to disrupt alien technology. Within minutes, half of the invasion fleet was destroyed or severely damaged. Burning alien ships tumbled through space as their crews struggled to contain hull breaches and reactor failures. Admiral Korvac screamed orders at his subordinates, but his own flagship was taking heavy damage from weapons he could not even see. The surviving Vorthan ships tried to regroup, but they discovered that humans had anticipated every possible tactical response. Wherever they turned, they found more hidden weapons waiting for them. The aliens had walked into a maze of destruction with no way out. Captain Mina led the human counterattack as Earth ships emerged from their hiding places throughout the solar system. The human fleet was small compared to the massive Vorthan armada, but every ship was crewed by fighters who understood that defeat meant the end of human civilization. The human ships moved with deadly precision, using tactics that combined thousands of years of military experience with cutting-edge technology. They struck at weak points that human intelligence had identified through careful study of captured alien vessels. Every shot was calculated, every maneuver was planned. Colonel Tae-hyun commanded the ground-based defense systems on Earth itself. Massive particle beam weapons built into mountains reached out across space to strike at enemy targets. The weapons were powered by fusion reactors and guided by supercomputers that could track hundreds of targets simultaneously. The Vorthans found themselves fighting an enemy unlike anything they had ever encountered. These were not the helpless primitives their scouts had described, but a species of natural-born warriors who had turned their entire solar system into a fortress. Alien technology was useless against human tactics that had been perfected through millennia of constant warfare. Admiral Korvac watched in horror as his mighty fleet was systematically destroyed by creatures he had dismissed as savages. His own flagship shuddered under repeated impacts from human weapons, and he realized that he had made a terrible mistake. The humans were not primitives at all. They were the most dangerous opponents the Empire had ever faced. The battle in Earth's solar system raged for hours as human forces systematically destroyed the Vorthan invasion fleet. Admiral Korvac tried desperately to coordinate a retreat, but his communication systems were failing due to Dr. Jinwoo's electronic warfare attacks. Half of his ships were already destroyed, and the survivors were scattered throughout the solar system, being hunted by human strike teams. Captain Mina commanded her ship, the Defiance, as it engaged a massive Vorthan battlecruiser in single combat. The alien vessel was 10 times larger than her ship, but size meant nothing in the vacuum of space. Human ships were built for speed and agility rather than intimidation. They could dance around the clumsy alien giants while striking at vulnerable points with surgical precision. The human crew worked with mechanical efficiency that amazed even themselves. Years of training and preparation had turned them into a perfect fighting machine. Every person knew their job exactly and performed it without hesitation. The gunners targeted weak spots that intelligence had identified. The engineers maintained maximum power to weapons and shields, and the navigators plotted attack runs that maximized damage while minimizing risk. Major Sujin led a squadron of human fighters as they swarmed around damaged Vorthan ships like angry bees attacking a giant. The fighters were tiny compared to the alien vessels, but they carried weapons that could punch through the strongest armor. Human pilots flew with reckless courage, diving through enemy fire to deliver killing blows at point-blank range. Colonel Jin Young continued to coordinate the hidden weapons throughout the asteroid belt. His railgun platforms fired continuously, sending streams of tungsten projectiles into the enemy formation. Each projectile had enough kinetic energy to completely penetrate a Vorthan hull, and the platforms could fire dozens of rounds per minute. The aliens had never faced weapons that combined such devastating power with pinpoint accuracy. Dr. Sung-hoon activated his greatest creation from his laboratory in the Himalayas, a computer virus specifically designed to infiltrate and destroy Vorthan systems. The virus spread through enemy communication, networks turning their own technology against them. Navigation computers began giving false readings. Weapon systems targeted their own ships, and life support systems started failing randomly. The virus was a masterpiece of programming that had taken years to develop. Dr. Sung-hoon had studied every piece of alien technology that humans had recovered and identified weaknesses in their computer systems. The virus was designed to remain hidden until activated, then spread rapidly through any connected network, causing maximum chaos and destruction. Lieutenant Colonel Tae-hyun commanded the massive defense platforms hidden on the moon and throughout the outer solar system. These weapons had been built in secret over the past decade using mining equipment and construction robots to hollow out asteroids and install powerful energy weapons. Each platform was capable of destroying a capital ship with a single shot. The human defense network was unlike anything the Vorthans had ever encountered. It combined fixed fortifications with mobile strike forces, hidden weapons with conventional fleets, and electronic warfare with kinetic attacks. The aliens found themselves fighting on multiple fronts simultaneously while their own systems turned against them. Admiral Korvax realized that his invasion had turned into a complete disaster as he watched his flagship being torn apart by human weapons. The bridge filled with smoke and sparks as control systems failed one by one. His crew was panicking, and many of his subordinates were already dead or wounded. The mighty destroyer of hopes was being destroyed by primitives who should not have been able to threaten a single Vorthan scout ship. The few surviving Vorthan vessels tried desperately to escape from the solar system, but found that humans had anticipated this possibility as well. Hidden minefields blocked the most obvious escape routes while human ships hunted down individual stragglers. The trap was so complete that very few enemy vessels managed to reach the edge of the system. Captain Dayun commanded one of the newest human warships as it pursued fleeing Vorthan cruisers toward the outer planets. Her ship was a hybrid design that combined alien power sources with human weapons and armor. The result was a vessel that was faster and deadlier than anything either species had built separately. The battle finally ended when Admiral Korvax's flagship exploded in a brilliant fireball that could be seen from Earth. The destruction of the command ship caused the remaining Vorthan forces to surrender, rather than continue fighting. Human forces had achieved the impossible, defeating an invasion fleet that should have been able to conquer their entire world with ease. Commander Hyunwoo stood in the war room beneath Seoul watching the tactical displays as the last enemy ships were either destroyed or captured. The human victory was complete, but he knew that this was only the beginning. The Vorthan Empire would not ignore the destruction of an entire invasion fleet. They would send more ships, and humanity would have to be ready to fight an even larger enemy force. Dr. Jinwoo and his team immediately began studying the captured alien vessels to learn everything possible about Vorthan technology. Within hours, they had teams of engineers crawling through every compartment, cataloging weapons systems, engines, computers, and everything else they could find. The knowledge gained from these ships would be essential for the battles to come. The few Vorthan ships that escaped from Earth's solar system limped back toward the Empire, carrying news that would shake the Galactic government to its very foundations. The survivors told stories that seemed impossible to believe. A primitive world had not only survived the largest invasion fleet in recent history, but had completely destroyed it, using weapons and tactics that defied all known military doctrine. Captain Vex was one of the few Vorthan officers to escape the disaster at Earth, his ship. The Night Terror had lost half its crew and most of its weapons, but he had managed to reach the edge of the solar system before the humans could destroy him. The journey back to the Empire took several weeks, and during that time, he tried to make sense of what he had witnessed. The humans had not fought like any species the Empire had ever encountered. They did not meet the Vorthan fleet in open battle as honor demanded. Instead, they used deception, stealth, and coordination that turned their entire solar system into a weapon. The aliens had walked into a trap so sophisticated that it could only have been planned for many years. When Captain Vex arrived at the Imperial capital, he was immediately summoned before Emperor Malthus to give his report. The throne room was filled with high-ranking officials who listened in stunned silence as he described the battle. The Emperor interrupted several times to demand that the captain repeat certain details because they seemed too incredible to believe. Admiral Korvax was reported killed in action along with most of the invasion fleet. The destroyer of hopes had been completely destroyed by primitive weapons that should not have been able to scratch its armor. 2,000 of the Empire's finest warships had been reduced to floating debris by creatures who had barely reached their own moon only decades earlier. The Emperor's advisors assured him that the survivors must be mistaken or lying. The idea that any species could defeat a Vorthon invasion fleet was completely impossible. No primitive world had ever possessed the technology or organization necessary to threaten the Empire. The reports must be exaggerated or the result of some kind of technical malfunction, but the evidence was undeniable. Sensor readings from the surviving ships showed clear images of human vessels using weapons that combined familiar alien technology with completely unknown innovations. Long-range scans of the battle site revealed debris from thousands of Vorthon ships scattered throughout Earth's solar system. The humans had not just survived the invasion, they had won a complete victory. Emperor Malthus flew into a rage when he realized that his supposedly invincible empire had been humiliated by a species his scouts had marked as harmless. He ordered his remaining admirals to prepare an even larger fleet to return to Earth and destroy every human in existence. This time, they would not underestimate their opponents on our Earth Commander Hyun-woo addressed the United Earth Assembly in a speech that was broadcast to every human settlement in the solar system. He stood before representatives from every nation on Earth, as well as the colonial administrators from Mars, Luna, and the asteroid mining stations. His words would inspire humanity for generations to come. We have shown the galaxy that humans will not kneel before tyrants. Hyun-woo declared, "The Vorthon Empire came to our world, expecting to find slaves instead. They found warriors who refused to surrender our freedom. This is only the beginning of our fight for independence. We must prepare for the battles to come, because our victory has marked us as enemies of the greatest military force in known space." Dr. Jinwoo worked around the clock with his expanded team of scientists and engineers to reverse engineer the captured Vorthon technology. Within weeks, human shipyards were producing vessels that combined the best aspects of both species engineering. The new ships were faster than anything the Empire had ever built and carried weapons that no alien admiral had ever seen. Captain Mina was promoted to admiral and given command of Earth's first interstellar fleet. Her ships were crewed by volunteers from every nation on Earth as well as colonists from throughout the solar system. Every person who served under her command understood that they were fighting not just for Earth, but for the freedom of every species in the galaxy. The news of humanity's victory spread throughout the Empire through secret communication networks maintained by slave species and political dissidents. For the first time in centuries, beings who had given up hope began to dream of rebellion. The impossible had happened. Somewhere in the galaxy, a species had stood up to the Vorthons and won. On 1,000 different worlds, enslaved populations whispered about the humans who had defeated an entire invasion fleet. Underground resistance movements began to plan their own uprisings inspired by the example of a small blue world on the edge of known space. The Empire faced its greatest crisis in 500 years, as subject species began to believe that their masters could be defeated. Within 6 months of the battle in Earth's solar system, the conflict had spread across half the galaxy. The Vorthon Empire mobilized massive fleets to crush the human rebellion before it could inspire other species to revolt. But they discovered that fighting humans was completely different from conquering helpless civilizations who surrendered at the first sign of superior force. Admiral Mina led the Earth Defense Force in a series of lightning raids against Imperial targets throughout the border regions. Her ships struck at supply depots, communication stations, and isolated outposts before disappearing into deep space, using jump coordinates that the Vorthons could not predict or follow. The humans fought like no enemy the Empire had ever faced. The new human warships were technological marvels that combined alien power sources with innovative weapon systems designed by Dr. Jinwoo and his team. They were smaller than Imperial dreadnoughts, but infinitely more maneuverable, and their crews fought with a desperation and skill that veteran Vorthon officers found deeply disturbing. Colonel Jin Young commanded special operations teams that infiltrated Imperial colonies and freed enslaved populations. These liberation missions required incredible courage as small groups of humans landed on heavily defended worlds and fought their way to prisoner camps or slave facilities. The freed beings provided invaluable intelligence about Empire installations, and many joined the growing rebellion. The liberated species brought knowledge of Imperial technology and tactics that proved essential to the human war effort. They also provided bases and supply points that allowed Earth forces to operate deep in enemy territory. For the first time in centuries, the Empire found itself fighting on multiple fronts as dozens of worlds declared independence. Captain Sujin became famous throughout the galaxy for her daring raids against Imperial shipping. Her squadron would appear without warning, attack supply convoys, and vanish before enemy reinforcements could arrive. The Vorthons never knew where she would strike next, and their merchant vessels began traveling in heavily armed convoys that still proved vulnerable to her tactics. Major Taehyun led the engineering teams that built hidden bases throughout the contested regions of space. These facilities were concealed in asteroid fields, nebulae, and other locations where Imperial sensors could not detect them. Each base contained repair facilities, ammunition stockpiles, and communication equipment that allowed human forces to coordinate their operations. The Vorthons tried desperately to adapt to human tactics, but they were fighting an enemy unlike anything. In their experience, humans did not follow the established rules of galactic warfare. They struck without warning, used deception and misdirection as primary weapons, and refused to meet Imperial fleets in the kind of formal battles that the Empire preferred. Dr. Sung Hoon's computer viruses evolved and spread throughout Imperial networks, causing systems to fail at critical moments. Vorthon commanders never knew when their own technology would turn against them. Weapons would malfunction during battle, navigation systems would provide false readings, and communication networks would broadcast human propaganda instead of military orders. The psychological impact of fighting humans proved almost as devastating as their physical weapons. Imperial soldiers who had never known defeat began to question whether their cause was just stories spread through the ranks about human pilots who sacrificed themselves to save alien civilians and human soldiers who showed mercy to defeated enemies. Most importantly, humans proved something that the galaxy had forgotten: that individual courage could triumph over overwhelming odds. They fought not for conquest or glory, but for the simple belief that all intelligent beings deserved freedom. Their cause attracted volunteers from hundreds of different species who had suffered under Imperial rule. Emperor Malthus watched his empire slowly crumble as world after world declared independence. The war that he thought would last weeks had stretched into years of constant fighting. His advisors assured him that victory was still possible, if only they could destroy Earth itself. But human ships had been seen operating thousands of light years from their home system. The Empire tried to negotiate, several times offering to recognize human independence in exchange for an end to the rebellion. But humanity and their allies had learned that tyrants who were shown mercy would only use it to prepare for the next attack. The war would continue until the Vorthon Empire was completely destroyed. Admiral Hyunwoo commanded the largest human fleet ever assembled as it prepared to strike at the heart of Imperial space. The time for defensive warfare had passed. Now Earth would carry the fight to the enemy homeworlds and show the galaxy what happened when a free people were pushed too far. The final assault on the Vorthon Empire began 2 years after the first human victory in Earth's solar system. Admiral Hyunwoo commanded a combined fleet of over 5,000 ships, crewed by humans and representatives from more than 50 liberated species. The Armada was the largest collection of free worlds ever assembled, and it carried weapons that combined the best technology from dozens of different civilizations. Emperor Malthus waited in his crystal palace, surrounded by the remnants of his once mighty military. The empire that had ruled 3,000 star systems now controlled fewer than 100 worlds. Most of his former subjects had either declared independence or joined the rebellion against him. His throne room was no longer filled with groveling ambassadors, but with desperate generals pleading for reinforcements that no longer existed. The rebel fleet moved through Imperial space like an unstoppable tide, liberating world after world and adding their populations. To the growing alliance, human tactics had been adopted by dozens of species who discovered that fighting for freedom gave them strength they never knew they possessed. The Empire found itself facing enemies on every front as former slaves turned their knowledge of Imperial systems against their former masters. Captain Dahyun led the assault on the Imperial shipyards at Vorth Prime, the most heavily defended installation in the Empire. Her ships faced orbital fortresses that had been built over centuries and were supposedly impregnable. But human engineers had studied the defenses for months and identified weaknesses that the Vorthans never suspected existed. The battle for Vorth Prime lasted 3 days and nights as human forces systematically destroyed the massive defensive installations. Dr. Jinwoo's computer viruses turned the base's own weapons against each other, while kinetic bombardment from human ships reduced the fortresses to rubble. The shipyards that had built the Imperial fleet for 5 centuries were completely destroyed. Major Sujin commanded the ground assault teams that landed on the Imperial capital world. Her Marines fought their way through the crystal city that had been built from the bones of defeated species. For the first time in history, enemy soldiers walked through the halls of the Imperial Palace while the Emperor cowered in his throne room. The final battle came when Admiral Hyunwoo met Emperor Malthus face to face in the crystal throne room. The once mighty ruler of the galaxy was a broken old creature who begged for mercy while offering to share his remaining wealth with the rebels. Hyunwoo looked at the being who had caused so much suffering throughout the galaxy and spoke the words that would end an era. "Your empire is finished," he said quietly. "We offer you the same mercy you showed to the countless species you enslaved and destroyed." The crystal throne that had symbolized galactic oppression for centuries was shattered by human weapons, its pieces distributed to the liberated worlds as reminders of what they had overcome. In the months that followed the fall of the Empire, new governments formed throughout the galaxy, based on principles that humans had fought to establish. No species would be enslaved. All beings had the right to determine their own destiny, and aggressor nations would face united opposition from the free worlds. Admiral Mina was elected as the first president of the Galactic Freedom Alliance, a position she accepted reluctantly because she preferred commanding ships to governing politicians. The Alliance established its capital on a neutral world, equidistant from Earth and the former Imperial Center, so that no single species would dominate the new government. Dr. Jinwoo founded the Galactic Institute of Technology, where scientists from hundreds of species worked together to develop innovations that would benefit everyone. The institute became a symbol of what could be accomplished when different civilizations cooperated instead of fighting each other. Knowledge was shared freely, and technological advancement accelerated beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Earth became the center of the new galactic order, not as conquerors but as protectors of liberty. Human ships patrolled the space lanes, ensuring that no species would again face the horror of enslavement. The galaxy had learned at tremendous cost that there were some lines that should never be crossed. The war had lasted 3 years and cost millions of lives, but it established principles that would govern galactic civilization for centuries to come. Freedom was not something that could be granted by rulers, but something that had to be fought for and defended by ordinary beings who refused to accept tyranny. Commander Hyunwoo retired from military service and returned to Earth, where he wrote his memoirs about the war that changed the galaxy. His book became required reading in schools throughout the Alliance and inspired generations of young beings to value freedom above security. The galaxy had learned that even the smallest world could make a difference if its people were willing to fight for what they believed in. Terran. Borders remained forbidden not because of superior technology or overwhelming military force, but because Earth had become a symbol of hope for every species in the galaxy. The humans had proven that tyrants could be defeated, that freedom was worth any sacrifice, and that ordinary people could accomplish extraordinary things when they united for a common cause. The Vorthan Empire was gone forever, but its legacy lived on in the determination of free beings throughout the galaxy. To never again allow such tyranny to arise, the galaxy had been reborn in freedom, and it would remain free as long as there were beings willing to fight for it.